Welcome to another 5-minute religious education recap video. We're on the exam board Eduqas. We are looking at the study of a world faith with a focus on Judaism, and we're exploring the Jewish practices part of the paper. And today's session is going to focus upon the festival of Sukkot, and I'm hoping you'll be able to explain the origin, meaning, and the celebration of Sukkot. So the origins and meanings then. Well, Sukkot, it's also known as the Jewish Harvest Festival. It lasts for 7 days, and during the kind of first and second day, many Jews don't do any work. In a nutshell, it remembers the 40-year period when the Jews were travelling in the desert on their way to the Promised Land. So if you haven't, I'd have a little bit of a look at the Covenants video that I've put on my channel. This goes through a little bit of the idea of the Promised Land and the Jews travelling there. But what Jews will also do is they will build shelters or booths. And what this is doing is that Jews are remembering the temporary shelters that the Jews built when they were travelling through that desert to go to the Promised Land. And there's a quote here from Leviticus. It says, "And the Lord spoke unto Moses, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, saying, The 15th day of this 7th month shall be the Feast of Tabernacles for 7 days unto the Lord." Two things to note in there. God mentions that there's going to be a Feast of Tabernacles. Tabernacle is a posh word for tents, so basically like these little booths that the Jews used to create and travel around in, but also it says it's going to be 7 days. So ultimately, Sukkot is a mitzvah that has to be followed. Now, Sukkot, it reminds Jews how God cared for and protected the Jews during their time in the desert. And God instructed that Sukkot should be remembered and celebrated, so it is a mitzvah. And again, I'm going to bring this into the book of Exodus, and it says, "You shall dwell in Sukkot 7 days, so that generations will know how the Israelites lived." So one of the things is that Jews have to reenact this business of being in these booths, because again, it's a mitzvah, so it's an expectation. God has instructed them to do it. And we're going to explore how Jews celebrate Sukkot in the next slide. So Jewish families then, they will build a thing called a sukkah. Okay, you can see an image of it there on the screen, and this is like a little booth, like a little temporary booth that they build. And families, they'll often eat, some will sleep in the sukkah. Jews will study the Torah in the sukkah. Some communities, maybe they can't do it in their own homes, so they might go to the synagogue and they might build a sukkah together. But there's a bit of symbolism behind this, and we'll explore it now. But in Exodus, as we said, Moses, and what he does is he's there in the desert, and these sukkah, they actually shelter the Jews. And what Jews are doing in these modern times is recreating that traveling through the desert and reminding themselves how God always protects them and always cares for them. And ultimately, that's what these sukkah represent. Now, the sukkah then, it has some specific features. So first of all, it's got to have one side's got to be open, obviously, so you can get in, but it's meant to be like welcoming and to create a community. But also at the very top, I don't know if you can see in the image, there's this thing called sach. Now, sach is kind of a bit of a clear image there. It's kind of plant material. And two big things here. It needs to be sparse enough, so thin enough to allow light to get through, but it must be thick enough to provide more shade than sun. Two big reasons for this. Light, it represents the presence of God all throughout the entire world. But just like the sun, you can't directly look at light. And in the same way, Jews feel you can't experience the transcendent God, the God who's above and beyond the universe. But what you can do, the light helps us to see everything else in the world. And God's greatness can be reflected in the actions of those in the world. So there's the beautiful image here about how Sach, it actually helps Jews to think, I need to bring God's goodness into the world through my actions and following the mitzvah. Now the idea of shade, the shade represents the clouds of glory which protected and guided the Jews through the desert in Exodus. So again, if you go to the Covenants video, it mentions there how Moses and the Israelites, they were guided by clouds of glory and they were protected by a pillar of fire at night. So again, having the shade reminds them of those clouds. Now finally, celebrations at home. During Sukkot, Jews, they will use two special objects, the lulav and the etrog. A lulav, it is basically, well, you can see it there, it's made of palm, myrtle and willow leaves placed in a wooden holder, and it represents all the different types of people who should be united as a community in Judaism, coming together and following the mitzvah together. Because if all Jews follow the mitzvah together, they are more likely to bring about the Messianic age. The etrog is a citrus fruit. Now some Jews argue that the lulav represents almost like the body, the spine, and the etrog represents the heart, meaning that Jews are fulfilling the Shema by loving God with all of their heart and all of their might. So together, those two symbolize the whole body working together to follow the mitzvah and to worship God. However, looking at this then, during the festival of Sukkot, Jews are required to shake the lulav and the etrog in 6 directions. Now, some argue this is to represent how God is omnipresent, he's everywhere. But there's also in the synagogue a lulav parade, bringing that together so the whole community celebrate together. Now, have a check down this checklist, look at the key terms, see if you can link them to the celebration of Sukkot. If you want to push yourself a little bit further, here's some example questions. Whatever you get up to, best of luck.